I also have, my ears are pretty much stopped up, so I'm not sure if I'm loud enough. If I'm not, just tell me. But I also like this work. I like these projects, and so I get excited. So sometimes my pace is a little bit too fast. So if you just kind of get the picture. Greg Lewis is here with me. Greg is the program manager for the EEOICPA program, as well as the overall director of some of the programs that I'm talking about. Cecilia Kennedy is here as well. And so all of us are available for discussion, questions, or whatever. Before we get started, I want to talk about the National Day of Remembrance. I think that Jim is actually here, and so he certainly knows a lot about this area. He's certainly been a real mover and a shake in terms of making this happen. But on July 16, 2012, the Senate announced the passage of Resolution 519. It was a resolution that was there to celebrate the accomplishments of our nuclear workers. This has been going on for some time. I think this was the 4th year that we've had this. Again, the Cold War patriots have been a major force in terms of making this happen. These individuals paid a huge sacrifice, and just taking one day out is not enough, but that certainly happens. And to have Congress come together and agree on something is certainly a major feat in itself. But we partnered with Cold War patriots, and this year there was a huge celebration in Nevada, as well as other celebrations throughout the DOE complex and throughout former worker and the Cold War Patriots organizations. It certainly was very good, and I hope that we will be able to continue with those efforts. Again, in terms of DOE's core mandate, you've heard from NIOSH. There's been some mention of DOE. We've kind of chimed in a little bit in the Department of Labor in terms of their role. So I wanted to just take a few minutes to share the role that we have, because ultimately we're talking about the DOE workers. These are DOE workers. And so while NIOSH and DOL have a major activity and task to do, these are our workers. So all the support that we can provide in various ways, and I'll talk about that, is very important to us, because we want to make sure that things are available so that the right decisions can be made about the workers. So primarily on this slide, we talk about sort of 3 major areas with regard to NIOSH and Department of Labor. And certainly we respond to them with information regarding employment verification. We support labor, NIOSH, and the advisory board. And Ted talked about the role of the advisory board and their independence and their great expertise as well on large-scale research and site characterization projects. And we also conduct research in coordination with the Department of Labor and NIOSH about covered facilities. We had some questions on that earlier this morning. And so our role is at every junction where it's needed. We make sure that they're getting the information that they need. And again, these were our facilities, our operations, and so we sponsor site tours. We do whatever we need to do in terms of making sure that they understand everything that they need to understand, and then if not, to come back again for questions. We have a group called Legacy Management Group as well. They actually work with us from headquarters. They're very good. They're experts in records management and searching of records, and they certainly play a major role in terms of what we do. Because we have a lot of DOE facilities, a lot of activities, a lot of operations, over diverse activities over a long period of time, we certainly can't do all that we need to do by ourselves. And so we have partnership with the various sites where the operations took place and where the records are located. And we have site coordinators there and site contacts there to help us with getting the information to the right places. Also, as a part of this overall process is that we fund, DOE would actually fund whatever is required, whatever is needed to get those records, to get them to NIOSH, to get them to the Department of Labor, to get verifications or whatever it is. So we have funding sources all over the DOE complex. Very difficult to manage those, of course, because they're very diverse organizations that are doing that. But that is a critical part in terms of what we do. A little bit about the individual records, employment verifications. A lot of requests come in. There are a lot of workers that have concerns, they have questions. And first thing, the people that are answering the questions want to do is work at DOE. And so the employment verifications, we do about 6,000 a year. So and it seems to be growing, not necessarily going down. Those records for NIOSH, we've heard, and we'll hear some more later, almost 5,000 per year. Document acquisition requests, work histories and exposures. We heard a little bit about that today, those kinds of things. Those are or diverse things to look for and to try to find. We're looking back over records over a very long period of time. And so right now, if you have a records management system set up, you go in, you search for things, you find it, something you can spit out on the other end. But in some cases, when we go to sites, there could be 15 or 20 or 30 different types of record systems that are operating, especially ones from the past. They're old, they don't speak to each other, it's very difficult. They could be in a file cabinet, not necessarily computerized or whatever, or if they're in a computer, some kind of computer database, maybe they're so old that they're not able to search them or whatever. So some cases it's complex to do, and I've heard some questions, some comments today already about DOE in terms of the DOE find records or whatever. When we take that particular action, it's a very serious action for us, and we don't want to come back right away with no, we couldn't find anything. So sometimes there are problems about timeliness or whatever, but we want to make sure that we overturn, we look through everything before we go back to say that we don't have records or that records were missing or whatever it is. But that can be difficult, especially for old records, but we're certainly committed and we're working hard to do that. Again, someone mentioned about contractors and subcontractors, and so I'll stop for a moment and just talk about that a little bit. We have the DOE prime contractor, or the managing and operating contractor, or contractors that do very specific tasks for DOE. And so those records and where they go and what they do in today's climate would be easy to find. But sometimes we have subcontractors, and because some of the projects that we do at DOE are very complex projects, we have subs, we have the prime, we have a sub to a sub, a sub to a sub, and so in some cases it gets difficult for us to locate those records for these various subs. Our office, we've partnered with other offices within the Department of Energy over the last few years to put specific regulations and things in place so that we don't have those kinds of things happening in the past, that records are kept, whether you have the various tiers or sub-tiers or not. So that's a very difficult thing that we've done. Some of the things over the past when we try to find, people come to you and workers, they have a sincerity and an openness and honesty about them when they're talking to you about these various things. I worked at this place, I did these kinds of things. We've been creative in the past in terms of how do we verify those things. We've been looking at things like old phone books and school things or whatever, something to show, because in some cases like Hampton, for example, you wouldn't have been in that area if you weren't working on those projects. You wouldn't have been living there, you wouldn't have been going to the schools or having utilities or things like that. So we've been creative in some cases in trying to pull together some kind of documents or something that will show that these people work there in these various jobs. Some of if you go back just 1 second to that one, some of these packages that we're delivering to NIOSH, Department of Labor, for their review and use, sometimes they could be hundreds of thousands of pages long, so they're very, in some cases, in-depth kinds of things, and you're looking through all those things for 2 pages or 2 paragraphs or whatever it is, but we try to make sure that we're turning over all of the documents. Okay. Different sites and different departments, again, over the years, people have organized, reorganized, and changed, and bendings are different, but we try to look through these various things for the various kinds of records. Large-scale research projects, again, those are quite intense. They can be costly, but it calls for a close collaboration and intensity and passion associated with those things. I talked before about sort of budgeting and DOE having financial responsibility for for these various contractors, and there's a lot of debate in terms of, well, why are you paying for it instead of these contractors? Because contractors go for a finite period of time. The new contractors that are actually running these projects now, they may not have been the contractors years ago with these records or whatever it is, and so the way their contracts are written currently, and certainly working on those things, they're not the ones that are on the hook for some of the old historical things. And so this is how, again, we want to bridge the gap wherever we can in terms of making the information available. In terms of classification, we talked about classification of documents before, and the need to know. Ted mentioned the involvement of the board and the board's contractors in terms of looking at documents even though they've been classified. And so it was a conscious decision of the board members that some of them didn't feel the need to be cleared for looking at classified documents, but usually within the board, within their contractor, there are enough individuals that have been cleared that they can look through these various documents and turning things around in a reasonable period of time. I'll talk a little about the security plan, and if you have a lot of more in-depth information, Greg will, questions or whether Greg can probably give you some elaborations on that. But 2 or 3 years ago, we had some concerns about documents not being released because of national security concerns or whatever. And so we developed, we're a health and safety organization within the bigger organization where we work, there's security experts. We partnered with them to put together a security plan that would make sure that we can gather all the information, we can facilitate reviews, we can get tours, we can get things done in an expedited way, but that we don't violate any of the national security requirements or whatever it is. And so there are many ways to get information from documents from people, from workers, and whenever we bring workers in, if there's a need for them to talk about classified information, if they feel that's important to be able to give us the best possible picture, we can reinstate their clearance for a day or a week or whatever is required so that they, because not only these workers are concerned about safety and health and providing information, they still have a strong allegiance. These are our Cold War patriots, they're these workers, and they are still serious about not violating any, any of those national security requirements. So if they have things, they're the ones that typically will say, we want to talk about something, but we need to be cleared for that. We make those arrangements, find the right location. And if they're located someplace else now, they're not near DOE sites, sometimes we arrange for other federal agencies where they can go. We can have these meetings and have these discussions. Greg, was there anything else on the security side that you needed to follow up on this morning about security?
I mean, no, the only thing I would say is it's not a one-way street. It's not a situation where the NIOSH folks or the claimant or the interviewee, says their piece and then we say, no, you can't say this, that, and the other. If we cross those out, we're good. It's more of a back and forth, where the NIOSH people or the interviewee will say, we'll say their piece or write their piece down and say, all right, well, we're having some concerns about, these particular words and this. So, what are you trying to say, or what's the important part about that? And so what if you say, I gave the example before, instead of saying we put 2.3 microcuries into this particular thing, you can say we put between 1 and 5 into, we kind of, if we fuzz it up a little bit while still keeping the exposure, we're not getting to the, how do you build the whatever. So a lot of times, and I don't believe we've ever had an instance before where the important part to the exposure and to the dose reconstruction or to NIOSH or DOL was lost in what we had to cut out. So it's not a one-way street. It's a very much back and forth process.
Questions? Yes?
Yeah, from our point of view, when is this triggered? What if a claimant calls and said, I believe I have classified information and I'm not comfortable sharing it? When do we call you? What do we do?
Claimants typically, if they make that statement, they're very aware of security requirements, and typically when the interview is scheduled, they may say, I want to talk about classified information in an environment that I can do that. So usually they're bringing it forth. But a few occasions, interview is being conducted, and a person will say something, and the people doing the interview realize that, and they stop the interview and say, we need to get a different setting, we need to get a different clearance, or whatever it is. So it could come from the claimant, the initial request, or it could happen at the time of the interview that there's a need for a different setting for those discussions.
And there's also on the back end, there's an opportunity for a classified hearing. It doesn't happen too much because typically it can usually be worked out before then, but DOL has made arrangements for a secure area to actually have a hearing or to write a statement. A lot of times a statement is easier than a live hearing, but there are, if there's ever a concern, typically you should be able to bring it to either DOL or NIOSH, who can then pass it to, says, hey, DOE, we have a concern, and we work out a way, or you can bring it to us directly too. But typically in the process, it's usually, I would think you're usually working with DOL or NIOSH when you run into those type of things. But it usually ends up with us involved in one way or another.